Great. Hello, DLD. How are you guys feeling? Yeah, still alive? I have to give you all a huge amount of credit for absorbing this incredible sort of machine gun fire of ideas, idea after idea, and still being here. But the best is yet to come, because even before you have a drink, don't go anywhere. I'm going to give you a chance to save the world if you can just stay put for another 19 minutes. So I wanted to talk to you today about a few different things, but I want to do a very quick poll first. Who among you knows about the IPCC and the 1.5 degree climate target? Okay, a very climate literate audience, I'm grateful. Now, who among you knows about the global resources outlook from the International Resource Panel? Still surprisingly many, but all I would say is if you don't have it, go out and get it. It's coming out soon, and Sandrine, who's speaking a bit later, is going to tell you more about it. But the reason I mentioned those two things together is that I wanted to start out with some good news and maybe some stuff we still have to work on. So I'll start out by presenting you with the good news first. I'll have the presentation first. There we go. So, this is the good news, and it is genuinely good news, ladies and gentlemen, right? You have an incredible commitment to solve a big part of the climate crisis and build a whole new renewable energy system in record time. And for those of you who were at Azim's talk yesterday, we heard about a lot of the things that helped this. The fact that the cost curves and the technology are accelerating so much in the right direction, technology improves, costs come down. You have a magic situation where all of a sudden it seems viable to replace almost an entire energy system. But this isn't the only good news, and it isn't the only thing that's happening. At the same time as we're trying to replace fossil fuels with renewable energy, we are also trying to electrify everything. We're trying to bring in EVs. We're trying to bring in more electronics, more digitalization, more cloud computing. So the net output of this is there's great things being done for humanity and for the planet. However, here's where maybe the work we still need to do comes in, because we're facing, and please pardon the pun, we're facing a material challenge, or maybe a materials challenge. I think one of the challenges of growing up in a sort of dematerialized world is that we get very used to economic and technological thinking. I've heard phrases this week, which I love hearing, they're fascinating, like the marginal cost fell to zero, which makes us think that this stuff is all very, very easy. You know, things are becoming lightweight, things are becoming fluid. But out in the real world, where you actually have to build stuff, infrastructure, you actually need a lot of materials, a lot of minerals. And every company or every country has their list. They're called different things. They're called critical raw materials. They're called critical materials. They're called critical minerals. But either way, we know that we need a lot more of them, and we need them a lot faster than we've ever gotten them before. Now, again, for climate, this is very, very good news. So I'm not trying to throw any shade, but I think we want to ground ourselves a little bit in what this challenge actually means, and also how we're going to get there together to solve it. So to give you a sense of orders of magnitude, estimates range from something like 3.5 to 6 times an increase in critical minerals. But what that does is actually elides some of the sharper increases. For example, the heretofore mentioned International Resource Panel says there'll be a 1,200% increase in lithium. So that's much more than 3.5 to 6, which sounds nice and cuddly and manageable, isn't it? And I think the other thing is that, you know, as William Gibson once said, one of my favorite writers, the future's already here, it's just unevenly distributed. You could say the same thing for critical minerals and materials. There are pockets of high concentration. There's also a whole series of other things, and trying to get this done in the period of time, if you think about the fact that a new mine, which we'll need some more of, takes 10 to 15 years to open, I think it's safe to say that we're in not only the best of times, but we're also really, really at crunch time. So, in addition to kind of the very physical challenge of getting things out of the ground, getting them to places, getting things built, getting renewables installed, I think there's also a dynamic of the energy industry that's been with us forever. Energy has always been a matter of geopolitics, and if for anyone interested in the topic, the book The Prize by Daniel Yergin is an all-time classic that helps understand that when you talk about energy, you also have to talk about geopolitics. And this question has been really bugging policymakers and all of those concerned with trying to meet this crunch at an acceptable cost for the planet and for world peace. So at the same time as you're facing physical challenges, material challenges, you're also facing geopolitical challenges. We tend to think somehow of renewables as being free of geopolitics, but actually, in the short term, while we build out the infrastructure, they're every bit as bound up with geopolitical challenges as energy ever was. So this question of diversification, of securing supply for individual countries, in a way is starting to rub up against, to create friction against the collaborative and collective energy that we all want to see. Because frankly, we do this together or we won't do it at all. But doing this together is something we've never really done. Energy's always been a somewhat competitive industry. So I'm going to pause there a second and say, okay, these are all facts. And I think many of these facts are known to many of you in the audience. But we need to kind of put them all together and think not just, okay, here's the situation, but what do we do about it and how are we going to tackle it? And some people might say, I work with very, very many environmental scientists, technologists, and so on. They will focus on the technical solutions to this challenge. But there's a challenge before that, and it's ourselves. It's our minds, and it's our mental models. And when we started digging into this, because at PACE, we work with companies, we work with governments, we work with NGOs, we realized the first thing we had to do to solve this was actually to unpack a number of mental models that were holding people back from seeing solutions. So I'm going to take a little diversion. Well, first, I'm going to pay tribute to Admiral Grace Hopper, a very wise woman. Who's heard of Grace Hopper before? One of the first computer scientists. Brilliant. A few. All of you should know her. But I think she's famous for this brilliant quote, which is basically the most dangerous phrase in the English language is, "We've always done it this way." And hopefully I've illustrated to you that if we try and do energy transition and minerals the way we've always done it, we're not heading into a great place. We won't be able to get things done in time, we'll cause significant damage, we'll give people a reason to back away from commitments, the climate will collapse, et cetera, et cetera. But don't worry, I'm about to give you some hope. This is the turning point. So then how do we do things differently? How do we actually figure out how to change our mental models? Well, first of all, we have to figure out what they are. Unlike many of my colleagues, I actually trained as an anthropologist. And one thing, and apart from all the jokes of what are you going to do with that when you grow up, I have an answer to that now. One of the things they teach you in anthropological methods is to understand what lies beneath the surface of culture. We are all basically a function of the things, the water we swim in culturally, the things that we believe to be true. So mental models like, for a long time, Milton Friedman and his idea that business was there to make a profit, full stop, the end, nothing else, that's a mental model. So in order to change it to a business must be there to make a profit and execute on a purpose, which we've seen a shift in mental models over the last 20, 30 years, you have to make space for those mental models. But first you have to understand what they are and where they are and why they're there, because they're often there for very good reasons. So we did a bunch of work with many of our stakeholders who are working in this critical minerals energy transition challenge, and we tried to uncover those mental models. I show you the iceberg here because it's a very good way of explaining that mental models are often very deep, and you can also run your Titanic into them if you're not careful. So I'll give you a couple of examples of the ones that we found. One of them is basically, you've seen this in headlines, this is the kind of thing that happens at Davos talks next week, so be alert for them. I'm giving you an inoculation against certain mental models in this talk. I've seen two very different mental models that still seem to coexist for different reasons. The first one is, don't worry, there's plenty of minerals out there, we just have to get them out of the ground. And everyone says, oh, phew, good, job solved. But for anyone who's ever been to a mine or seen a mine or tried to open a mine in that 10 to 15 years that it takes, the idea that we're suddenly going to scale up responsible mining, which costs a huge amount of money, takes a lot of time, it's really not a great answer. It's there in the ground, just get it out of the ground. The other mental model, which is equally prevalent, which is kind of fascinating, is if you're a company or a country, there's going to be a scarcity. It's going to be scarce. You're going to face a crunch. Get yours now. The English have a saying called buy now to avoid disappointment, right? So there's actually a lot of the consulting industrial complex is out there telling people exactly when the shortages are going to take place and what you have to do to get yours now. But if you've been understanding the implications of what I've been saying, we can't just everybody go and get yours now, because then there won't be any left for anybody else. And this is actually a collective challenge for more than 120 countries to meet. So how are we all going to get what we all need in the time that we all need it? The first order of business is we have to change our mental models around how we get there. Basically, this is the space we have to create in the minds of anyone who makes a decision around material or resource availability. This idea that intensive extraction of virgin materials is not the only way to design for our future. So in a way, that is the mental model that has to shift or expand. And we also have to bring a solution, because once you've raised the specter of potentially a better option, it's pretty good to have a solution to fit behind it. And the good news is we do. We do. So circularity, in its truest, widest sense, is actually around transforming how we design, how we use, how we reuse, how we repurpose. Basically, every choice about materials we make should be a circular choice. And right now, people just think about it primarily as the things that shouldn't have been produced in the first place and how we don't see them sort of cluttering up our world. That is not circularity, my friends. That is recycling and waste management. When you actually look at what circularity is in its full glory, there are anywhere between 9 and 10 so-called R's. So things like, and both on supply and demand, by the way, and the ones on demand side have barely been touched. We've optimized our production systems in such a way and our incentives in such a way as to be mute and find invisible the choices we make about materials. We can lightweight, we can collaborate, we can share, we can repurpose, we can do all sorts of things. And Matthias, my good colleague and friend, will talk about this very concretely with batteries and other things in a minute. And we also have the enablers to do it. But we have to reimagine. Our first job here is to reimagine our production systems before we can do any of this, and to restructure our public-private operations to be more collaborative and more sensible. And here's the prize for all of you who've been waiting very patiently to say, okay, what does this all add up to? Our wild and crazy friends at the Energy Transition Commission, I mean, they're very lovely, but they're not wild and crazy. They're actually very sober and sensible people. They have calculated that if we're able to get our act together and implement the full suite of circularity solutions, we could meet 30 to 50% of the materials demands that we need for the energy transition. We can do that. A third to half. So all of this shortage, all of this unhelpful competition, all this scramble to get it out of the ground, all the depletion of water, all of the geopolitical tension, that's a pretty good lever to use to reduce all of this. So I've basically given you the good news, the challenge, the mental model framework, and a bit of the potential solution to inspire you. What we are facing here is not primarily a technical challenge, or at least not at first a technical challenge. It is really a communication and marketing challenge. Almost no money is spent in the climate and environment world in strategic communication, because everyone assumes the facts are there in these reports that come out. They're hundreds of pages long, they're very well documented, and of course everyone has time to not only read them, but understand them and act upon them. Not the case. So to date, we've figured out that more has been spent on the most recent launch of a chocolate bar than on the entire area of critical mineral communication, and we are here to change that. And we need to basically get over awareness, but also we need to cross fields and sectors, because it's not enough to communicate to the policymakers or communicate to the technicians or scientists. We have to do two things. We have to create a new mindset, and so get out of the scarcity mindset, the competitive mindset, the old geopolitical extractive mindset that does not serve us, and create something that's creative and resourceful. And we have to do it for all of these people, all of whom we work with on a daily basis, apart from maybe the robots, but apparently that's coming. So in summary, we have to break mental models first in order to enable adoption at scale. This is phase 0 of the change to the world we want to see. In short, and we love this, we've worked with our creative partners, Worthy, who are geniuses, to create this idea of a campaign that renewable energy actually needs renewable mineral supplies. And the first time you start thinking about what renewable supplies look like, you open your mind to a completely different possibility. and actually technically proven with the right incentives, the right structures, the right collaborations. You've seen mineral circularity is actually a scalable, viable alternative. We just have to open our minds to it and then get to work. So here comes the ask. Back to my earlier point, no money's ever been spent on marketing this. Hopefully some of you have learned something or seen something here for the first time. We need to take you, the DLD, and basically 1000x it. And to do that, we need to be able to produce the creative campaign that has already been designed. So if you have funding, budget, interest, contacts, connections, ideas, enthusiasm, want to change the world, please, please come and join us. And by the way, we are not going home. Thank you very much.